I want to introduce our partners and my good friends, Jina Belcher, the Executive Director of the New River Gorge Regional Development Authority, and Andrew Davis, the Manager of Strategic Redevelopment. So guys, come on up.
Thanks, Michelle. So I know that this is the conversation that's kicking off the rest of a really great summit, and we are very excited to co-host this year with the Beckley-Raleigh County Chamber of Commerce. We are really excited to have today's conversation. We want to make sure that everyone in the room kind of understands, for some housekeeping purposes, we want this to be a very engaging conversation. This is not going to be we're going to talk at you. We want you to ask questions. We're going to have a little activity. But we also want you all to understand that there are a lot of different types of developers in this room right now. And we knew that it would be a very mixed a mixed bag of individuals. So we have, traditional commercial developers, we have downtown redevelopers, we have investors, we have industrial developers in the room. And so for the purpose of this conversation, we decided to move forward with a downtown developers discussion because, as you will hear Andy and I talk about quite a bit, downtown development and downtown redevelopment are some of the most difficult types of development that one can do, but there is a playbook that we often reference in a lot of the work we do throughout our communities to talk about downtown development and downtown redevelopment. So I want today and this evening to be very engaging with you all. We're going to bring in some case studies of projects that we are very aware of and have put their processes into practice in some of our communities that we'll talk about. And we want this to be a very casual conversation with everyone. The goal for today is to really come out of this conversation with some next steps to build a larger group that both the Chamber and NRGRDA continue to engage with for downtown development throughout the entire region. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andy. He's going to talk a little bit about today's agenda that we're going to go through, as well as our Downtown Development Playbook. That is one of our resources.
Thanks, Jina, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy Davis. I guess I sign my emails Andrew, so sometimes people call me Andrew, call me Andy. Either way, always happy to talk, and it's meeting people and creating partnerships that I think is time and time again the most important ingredient in redevelopment projects. That is a particular focus that I spend a lot of my time on, and although redevelopment is not in the name of our organization, development requires redevelopment, especially when you are a region comprised of communities that built up a lot of the developable areas many, many years ago. And we have old buildings, old sites that maybe haven't been used for that thing anymore, and we want to figure out a new way to use those. It's all about finding the partnerships. So if I haven't met you before, I look forward to meeting you, figuring out the roles that we can play, that you can play, and that the other partners in the room and elsewhere can put together to move redevelopment projects forward. Luckily, the New River Gorge region is not alone in those challenges. A lot of the same challenges that redevelopment faces have been workshopped and even, I won't say perfected. I don't know that it's ever a perfect practice, but there's a lot of experience that can be gleaned from other communities, other areas, and in particular, we're going to focus, as Jina mentioned, on the redevelopment playbook, or downtown development playbook, which as by nature, with it being focused on downtown development, has redevelopment as a primary focus in its strategies. So, what is it? Playbook, borrowing a term from sports. It's a practical guide created to help communities address the issues that they're going to address, the ones that they might face, but especially when you look at a lot of the traits that smaller communities have, rural communities have. Throughout Appalachia, going back decades, the whole reason that the Appalachian Regional Commission was created was the recognition that the communities throughout this area of America faced many of the same struggles. Industries changing, economies shifting, and a lot of that infrastructure, buildings, downtowns themselves, needing to find a new purpose and a new function. So, this Downtown Development Playbook looks at the issues that have been faced by other communities, puts those into bullet points and says you need to focus on this, this, and here are some of the issues, the problems that you might face. Who it's for. As I mentioned before, you have to have partners, and so none of this can be done by one entity alone. There we go. It sounds loud to me up here. Who it's for. It's for all those partners. It is for the local leaders. Without support from your local leaders, you might not have the success that you could have, and you might not have any success if they're not on board. Local leaderships are involved in the planning processes that often shape things like comprehensive plans. Getting them on board in any vision that you have and moving it towards implementation is a necessary ingredient. The developers themselves, the people who have the means, the businesses, maybe they have connections to investors already, you have to have them at the table. And they are one of the key partners that the Downtown Development Playbook is intended to serve. As I mentioned already, investors, but there are particular parts of the Downtown Development Playbook that speak to the investor's specific role, as well as how it plays into their relationship with the developer. Community organizations, those who know the issues that that particular community is facing best, those who have chosen it as their mission, whether it is focused on housing, whether it's focused on transportation, whether it's focused on public health. Getting those community organizations involved can help a project target specific issues in the community and make sure that a project outside of its pure bottom line might also create additional value and reach a larger audience, a larger market who that project can serve. With those key partners together, it's about project sustainability, it's about resiliency. You hear that word a lot, but what do we mean by it? The Downtown Development Playbook helps really define the fact that resiliency means that, yes, you may be pursuing a development project, a redevelopment project for the status quo, but let's make sure that we're considering what could change tomorrow, next week, next year. And as we've seen in recent years, a lot of those issues facing communities that can seem very local, public health, one of them can very quickly change a much larger economic landscape too. So those large shifts in public health and national economy are taken into consideration as well when we were talking about resiliency in your downtown and of your particular project. How do you do that? How do you bring all those people to the table, and why is this a tool that we're telling you that we should be leaning on? Because it has the key features require all of those partners to work through a series of questions, a series of exercises, a series to bring us all to the same table and ask the same questions, but most importantly, to provide different answers from each of our perspectives. So you'll work through things like a readiness assessment tool. You'll walk through things like an investment stage breakdown, which some of the partners at the table, the investors, they may be quite familiar with it. They may in fact be able to help answer questions for some of the other groups, partners at the table, the community organizations, who aren't quite as familiar with investment stages of development projects. This is a tool that helps facilitate these conversations among the partners sitting at the table. As Jina mentioned earlier, it gives great case studies. It's going to give a variety of communities, different sizes, different economic backgrounds, different histories. It's going to give you some case studies that we're able to relate to and find relevance when we're talking about a project in Beckley's downtown, just outside Beckley's downtown, in Hinton, where I was 2 hours ago, in Oak Hill, where I was this morning. So from the regional standpoint, we see a lot of similarities within all of the communities of the region, but we also know that there are as we'll talk about tomorrow, looking at housing as an issue. There are very community-specific issues, looking at data sets, putting it through the tools that are in the Downtown Development Playbook, looking at case studies. You're able to see what is relevant and what may not be perfectly relevant for your community, and comparing and contrasting. Investment vehicle models, very similar to the stage breakdown, or I should say complementary to the stage breakdown, lets you see the different formulas, the different partner groups that can come together to make a project development ready and again, sustainable and resilient. And then guidelines for practitioners and investors. That's a wide variety and a sort of a general topic there, but as you take a look at the playbook itself, you'll see what fits into that category. I feel like I've covered a lot that's on this slide, and if you give me a microphone, I'll talk all day, but really, this event is about you all and getting you all engaged with tools like this. So instead of talking more and more, I think let's switch to the next phase of the conversation, which is meeting the players.
Thanks, Andy. So, as Andy mentioned, the Downtown Revitalization or Redevelopment Playbook is a tool that has been used across Appalachia and even in communities like Princeton. A lot of folks compare our local communities to communities like Princeton. Grafton has used the Downtown Revitalization Playbook with their Tiger Hotel redevelopment, and so we're really fortunate to have, we've also, one of our very close friends and colleagues, Ty Bullock, who cannot be with us this afternoon, has used the Downtown Redevelopment Playbook in his work in Elk City. And so we really wanted to bring this to this conversation as a resource for other communities throughout Appalachia, but especially in our New River Gorge region. So one of the biggest things about downtown revitalization and development in general is making sure you have all the players at the table. So, we know that downtown revitalization doesn't happen in a silo, but we also know that the number one, the key player to any revitalization effort is the community members. You can have a willing investor, you can have an engineering firm that's willing to help support the diligence phase, you can have property owners, but if you do not have the support directly from the communities that you serve, then your downtown will not thrive. Dwayne took my slides. Okay, he brought them back. We want to talk a little bit about the players that you should assemble when you're looking at downtown revitalization. So, a lot of these are, in addition to the community members, are things that we always expect. You want to bring in entrepreneurs and small business owners. They are really the heart and soul of the downtown. They breathe life into vacant spaces, as we have seen in downtown Beckley with new businesses that have been locating there. They really are there to serve the walkability and provide a service to those downtowns and give you a reason to go. The other that you can't obviously ignore is local governments. These government entities have to work directly with the developer and sit at the table to talk about infrastructure, to talk about zoning support, and to also talk about seed funding, incentivizing folks to locate in vacant buildings, incentivizing individuals to extend infrastructure. There are a lot of unique financing tools that we're going to talk about in a little bit for downtown redevelopment that the playbook also provides support for, and that NRGRDA is willing to connect individuals with. Investors and developers are obviously the key. We can't turn any of these buildings into new facilities. We can't turn any of these vacant sites into new sites without the investors or the developers at the table. However, we also can't expect them to be the ones that operate solely on their own. Again, we all have to sit at the table together to do this work for a shared vision. Oftentimes, we found a lot of support from foundations and philanthropy. You're going to hear Andy talk about a lot of the service providers that we work with, especially in the diligence phase, to move a lot of the projects forward in the early stages. So whether that's working with the communities for capacity building, talking about preliminary engineering, talking about feasibility assessments, foundations and philanthropy have a very key role in helping support some of those original costs that are in the early stages of these projects. Also, CDFIs and financial institutions, a project is not going to be attractive to any investor or developer if it's not a bankable or revenue generating opportunity. So while we understand that a lot of folks expect grant resources for downtown redevelopment, we really have to focus on looking at these as an opportunity for traditional financing, bridge financing, technical assistance support, and other capital solutions that allow us to move these projects forward. Finally, nonprofits and intermediaries, they often offer technical support. I know this year we launched our New River Gorge Working Group Technical Assistance Fund. We deployed $680,000 to 13 projects across the region. All of them were community-based projects that are going to physically connect communities in some way via infrastructure. So folks that applied for those funds were awarded and are working with the vendors, the approved vendors of their choice, to move those projects towards implementation, because we understand that there are a lot of ideas out there, but until we get something on paper, do some financial analysis and design work, we can't attract investors, we can't support some alternatives coming from the local governments, and we can't incentivize these projects. So we have found that that technical assistance really does move the needle for these projects. So when we think about meeting the players, I know this is a lot of work, but I kind of like to frame the team in a kind of a unique way with 5 individuals. So the first person that you want on your team is, or at your table, is a spotter. The spotter is the visionary behind the project. They're the one that sees the bigger picture. It's, not just the bigger picture of one building, it's the bigger picture of the whole ecosystem that you're trying to build in your downtown or in your community. The second person that you want to ensure is at your table is what we call the framer. This person is your deal maker. They're the ones helping capital stack. They're the ones that are helping frame the structure. They're the ones that are helping make the deal profitable, and they're the ones helping come up with ideas with the visionary to ensure that the project moves forward effectively. So that's your deal maker. The third person on your team that you're going to want sitting at your table is the engager. This is almost as important, if not more important, than the spotter that was the visionary. The engager is the trust builder. So as we know, when we get into these projects, it's very easy to misinterpret conversations. It's very easy to blame when something goes wrong. And we know that that engager is the one that is responsible for staying true to the mission of the project, true to the mission of the team, and ensuring that trust is built in both the community and among the project team. Because the first thing that we know and have seen kill a project is a lack of trust across the team and the table. So the fourth person that we want on this team is the developer, right? So the developer is what we consider the risk taker. They're the ones that are coming to the table saying, we're going to give it a shot, we're going to see what works, and we're going to hope that we get our money back at the end of this. But we believe and we've trusted the engager, we believe in the spotter's vision, and we've worked with the framer to make this profitable. So, sorry, I thought you were asking a question. So the developer is that risk taker that you're always going to want to make sure is at the table. They're also the ones that bring those technical skill sets that a lot of the projects need. And so your developer partner is a very strong force on your team. And then finally, you're going to want to have your primary point of contact. The worst thing that we often find in these projects, whether traditional development or redevelopment, is that if there is confusion around the project's alignment coming from different members of the team, then you've immediately broken trust. You've immediately confused communities, you've confused your project team, and so that primary point of contact serves as the person that is coordinating all of the team members, all of the narrative around the project, and helping move the project forward incrementally. They also are the person that serves as the direct administrative point of contact for any of your financing entities that you have engaged in the project. So to just recap that, the folks that you want at your table are the spotter, who's your visionary, the framer, who's your deal maker, the engager, who's your trust builder, the developer, who's your risk taker, and the primary point of contact. So we feel that when we assemble our team with those 5 key individuals at the table, that the projects move forward more successfully and more consistently as a group for the greater community good. So we are there's one slide. There we go. So I am going to hope that this opens when I click this link. We want to look at a successful execution and a case study. So we chose a case study for the successful downtown revitalization out of Ohio. And the reason that we chose this one is, one, it was not one of the communities in West Virginia that utilized the playbook, because I really don't love when we compare ourselves to other communities and think that that we can't achieve what they have achieved, because that's wrong. But this particular project utilized a tool that we have. Does it not share? If I pop up a screen, will it not share?
I don't think we're hearing.
There's no here. It's just visual.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
There's no audio, sorry.
See if when you click on it, see what happens.
I did. It's on here, but not there.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay, no problem. We can share it after the fact. So the reason that we chose this project in Ohio is because they utilized a land bank. So a land bank is a tool that we have. It's one of our favorite tools in our redevelopment toolbox. We also have developed a land bank in Fayette County as the first county-based land bank. And so there's two types of land banks in West Virginia. There's a URA, which is an urban renewal authority, and there's an LRA, which is a land reuse agency. So in Fayette County, we developed a land reuse agency. They did at one time have a URA, an urban renewal authority, and we transitioned that to an LRA. But the beauty of this project in Ohio is that they utilized, just like a lot of communities across Appalachia, there were a lot of vacant and dilapidated properties in this town in Ohio. And they sat unused. They're what we call zombie properties. It's just, what are we going to do with these? They have so much character, but they need so much work, and they just sat unused for decades. So a lot of the counties came together in Ohio and said, why don't we just create a land bank? The goal of our land bank is really to come up with a solution to acquire properties, clear up the titles of these properties, and really package them together for strategic reuse. How can, while the goal of an LRA or a land bank is never to own property long term, it is how do we take those properties into ownership, into a public entity that can clean up those properties with a lot of the resources we have available through our DLAP programs in the state, through a lot of the resources that municipalities and counties have available to them. How do we clean up those properties, hold them in that land bank, and either prioritize them for a larger project or work with developers to flip these, to turn them into something that we can control the future of. That land bank operates as a board. It's a quasi-governmental agency, and they have to work together to determine that strategy. So you're not just flipping these and selling them back to anyone. You can determine who you want to sell these to. So that's exactly what happened in this town in Ohio. They worked together to package these buildings together for strategic reuse. They worked with developers and nonprofits, turned in a lot of these lots that they removed the structures from, turned them into green spaces, affordable housing, safer neighborhoods. And what that also did is it renewed investor confidence. It showed the investors in the communities, hey, these guys want to better their community. They want to have cleaner spaces. They want to have usable spaces and walkable communities. So it improved the aesthetic in the community. It created safer neighborhoods. It renewed the investor confidence, like we said. And the key takeaway was these land banks are not just for clearing blight. They are essential economic development tools. So they also give communities control of their future. So I want to talk just really briefly before I transition to Andy with some infrastructure on how we've used our land bank in Fayette County specifically. So Fayette County, all counties, all communities have abandoned structures. All of them have dilapidated structures. One of the biggest challenges that we see is working with the landowners to take the property owners to potentially get access to those properties, or, to go through the very cumbersome process as a county or a municipality to try to place a lien on that property to get it cleaned up. Nobody wants to put somebody in debt because their property is blighted, right? Like, we want to help them clean it up, or we want to convince them to let us clean it up. It's not our goal to put anyone in a financial hardship because they're not caring for the property. So the Land Reuse Agency was really a key tool for Fayette County. We prioritized early on as a land reuse agency identifying properties that were ideal for recreation infrastructure development. So do we have some properties that collectively together would make a really great put-in next to the river? Do we have some properties that would serve as a connector to two different trails? We also identified properties that would be ideal for housing development. And so while it could have been easy to just scoop up every property on the tax sale, we were very strategic and worked with an engineer to identify the properties that were best utilized and were best taken ownership of by the LRA. We then have had great success working with the county's DLAP program in prioritizing the removal of those abandoned and dilapidated structures. We have also then gone as far as to access brownfields funding to clean up those properties. And we have, as of a couple weeks ago, had our first sale on one of the properties that we did demolish and clean up. So for, just throwing some numbers out there, we took ownership of a piece of property that was donated to the Land Reuse Agency by an heir that lived out of state and said, I just can't keep up with this. I don't want to pay taxes on this. Is there somewhere that I can put this? I don't have anybody that's going to want it. It has an old car wash on top of it. It was my dad's. What do I do with this? So the county said, you could donate it to the LRA, the Land Reuse Agency. They said, okay, we'll donate the property. We tore down the structure, owned it outright as the LRA, and cleaned up the property with the DLAP funds that we had available, and we flipped that and sold that for $15,000. The individual that purchased it is putting a small repair shop on the lot next to his existing shop. So that we were then able to take that $15,000 and purchase additional properties through the LRA, through the tax sale and other means necessary that aligned with some of our strategic goals of recreation and housing. So I say all of this to say that this is not a new concept. Land reuse agencies and land banks have been created across a lot of communities. Charleston, Huntington, places like that utilize them for dilapidated structures, but we really see them as a tool for economic development, revitalization, and recruitment of investors that want to invest in these properties that we're cleaning up. So that example, we're happy to send out to folks. Michelle can send out the example since we can't see it on the screen, but we will also follow up with some downtown revitalization playbook links that you guys can review as well. So that's kind of the case study and a little bit of a more local success story that we've had with land reuse agencies for downtown redevelopment. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy. He's going to talk a little bit now about infrastructure, incentives, planning, and the role that NRGRDA plays in this whole process.
Thanks, Jenna. And in addition to downtown development, land banks can assist with non-downtown development as well. A lot of those recreation adjacent properties that Fayette County identified are not downtown. In fact, they're pretty remote, and especially the ones that are conducive to connectivity, things like that. There's a great online map too that can paint a much more vivid and complex picture of all the layers that Fayette County is using to analyze properties, which ones they've already identified, and it really literally connects the dots of existing development and possibilities. Successful. Aha. I didn't know I had to use buttons. Gotcha. Okay. So, we keep talking about pieces and partners and all the things that go together. Developers in the room know that without infrastructure, it can't happen. Now, outside of development, we often say laying the foundation, but in this room, I'm not going to use that analogy because it's not an analogy. We're actually talking about real foundations. Infrastructure is not the foundation, it's the infrastructure. It's the things that have to lead, connect from town, bring the water, the sewer, the internet. It's also the transportation, it's the roads. Fayette County, a lot of conversation about trails, not just Fayette County, Raleigh County, a lot of conversation about trails. So what have we begun doing? We've begun calling trails infrastructure. That's recreational infrastructure, and that's what we mean by that. So that fits within the category of infrastructure that we are referring to when we say the things that have to connect to properties for them to be viable for development projects. Do we have the best broadband? Do we have the best water and sewer? Do we have the best roads? Not necessarily. But do we have a vision for how we can get to not only the roads, the sewer, the water, the internet that serves our community, but that can be the best? Sure we do. Within our communities, within our municipalities and counties, we have comprehensive plans. We have statewide agencies that have been mapping out what changes need to be made, what improvements need to be made. And in recent years, especially since funding like congressionally directed spending has come back, we're trying to make these things happen. We're trying to take the plans from off the shelf and make them a reality, to build that infrastructure so that these development projects that were envisioned 5 years, 10 years, 20 or more years ago can become a reality. Success breeds success, and we know that without infrastructure, many of these development projects can't go anywhere. In terms of downtown revitalization, downtown development projects, we're talking about an area that's already developed. So downtowns have water, they have sewer, they have a lot of infrastructure, but a lot of it needs updating, right? I don't know where the most recent sewer main break was, but I know that within a mile of my house, there's been one within the last month. We should map those, right? And we actually do have those mapped. We're talking about layering the infrastructure that we want to build with the infrastructure that we have. We're talking about mapping the issues that need to be fixed, and then working to prioritize those while looking at how we prioritize the projects that work together in the communities to build the local economies in downtowns and out of downtowns. The same infrastructure we're talking about that may already exist in the downtowns often needs to be extended to that piece of property that's never been developed. So looking at the connections, the literal connections of the classic infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the more modern, the broadband that maybe the downtown hasn't had before. If you haven't had fiber but you want it, replacing the old internet infrastructure. And then the transportation infrastructure, things like, well, how do we connect our downtown to that bike trail a mile outside of downtown that thousands of people go to in spring, summer, and fall, but that they never make it to our downtown because they can't keep riding their bike? How do we do that? Once you get those things mapped out, right, the infrastructure that you have, the infrastructure that needs to be improved, and the infrastructure that you don't have, well, then you need to figure out how much it will cost to make those improvements and build that new infrastructure to support those development projects. And unless you just have that money sitting around, you need to figure out the financial tools you're going to need to get to that point. Tax credits are often a tool that gets used at the federal and state level. Tax credits are available, things like historic tax credits for buildings that are either within a district, a historic district, or individually are considered a historic structure. We have many historic districts within the New River Gorge region, and oftentimes at the local level there's an entity, something like a Historic Landmarks Commission, that helps to keep track of buildings and structures within that district, the maintenance that they may need, and making sure that projects that want to make improvements to buildings on the historic registry stay within the guidelines of the National Park Service, who oversees historic tax credits at the federal level, so that you don't go and do something that disqualifies it for those tax credits. At the state level, we have the State Historic Preservation Office. There are some changes happening at the state level now, organization-wise, to SHPO, but SHPO regularly provides redevelopment grants on an annual basis, and we stand ready to help coordinate looking at how the historic tax credits can be applied to a project in a historic district. New market tax credits, ones that are specific to census tracts. So you either are or are not in a new market tax credit area. That's the first question to ask. Am I in a census tract that qualifies for that? If you are, this can be a fantastic tool for development and redevelopment projects. We have some great case studies from within West Virginia and plenty from outside of West Virginia too, to Jina's point. And one that some of our partners in the region and in Charleston and other parts of the state can provide lots of expertise on how to deal with new market tax credits. In relation to that, community development financial institutions, CDFIs. We have in-state CDFIs. We also have a lot within the Appalachian region that are very familiar with how to pursue downtown redevelopment projects and development projects in general for rural communities. They know how to utilize tax credits, the analysis of different financial models for these projects, and it is actually within their mission, especially the nonprofit ones, to help projects get to the development ready process by looking at what tools can be applied, which ones can be stacked. As Jina mentioned earlier, brownfield remediation is often an issue. As I mentioned earlier, many of the sites we're looking at have been used before, and that prior use might have left some things behind that we need to deal with before we put something new on there. Luckily, in the state of West Virginia, we have some excellent partners housed at West Virginia University and Marshall. We have the West Virginia Brownfield Assistance Centers. They are each tasked with the northern and the southern halves of the state, so to speak, but since there's no straight lines in the state anywhere, dividing north and south or who's helping with what, we find staff from each of the Brownfields Assistance Centers ready and willing to help with projects here and across the state. They're often a partner in helping not only deal with the Brownfield specific issues and topics, helping to educate local leaders, developers, folks who might not have worked in the realm before, but also helping to connect funding. And so bringing federal brownfields remediation funding to projects, an excellent partnership with the two Brownfields Assistance Centers. Actually on my water bottle over there, I have a sticker that says, "Have you had a phase one?" They give it out at the West Virginia Brownfields Conference every year because that's a question that you should always ask. Have you checked to see if that site might have some residual, something left over from something it was used for before? You should always be able to answer, yes, I have had a phase one. And then you know which way to go from there of, well, we need to deal with something, or we're okay. No, nothing was found. Loan funds are another tool that can be available, but all of these tools, again, tie back to the financing, the funding for the project. Without the funding, you can't make it happen. So infrastructure, financing tools. Third, planning and permitting. Let's go back to the local level again. You're going to have ordinances, you're going to have zoning. Well, much like a phase one, you either will or you won't have zoning. But you need to know the answer to that question, do you have zoning? So you need to be working with your county and municipal governments to make sure that you're in compliance, make sure that your vision for the project fits within the laws of the land, the rules at the local level. And if there is some conflict between what you intend to do and what is currently permitted by local ordinance or law, you need to be building that relationship, having the conversations, and working to see if there is a path forward, not only for your project, but also that might be an opportunity to sort of show that the town needs to look at what's on the books. Maybe it was put in place a while back and we need to modernize it. We need to reassess. There are great case studies for this in the Downtown Development Playbook, and I assure you, if a problem has been run into, another community has probably run into it. If you run into a problem that no community has ever run into before, then we'll just put our community in the playbook, and the next time it's published, we'll get to be a case study ourselves. So we're committed to supporting projects. We've seen a lot of challenges. As Jina mentioned before, we have stepped up to play some roles when we've realized that no one else is playing the role yet. With the land bank, that's a prime example of the fact that right now we're serving as a role. We're managing 3 brownfields remediation grants. At the time, those municipalities didn't necessarily have an entity, an ideal entity, to take ownership of those properties that they had a vision for redevelopment. We were able to take that role, get remediation grant funding, and we're working now currently with those 3 municipalities to get the remediation completed so that the town can take ownership and move those properties back to productive reuse. In the meantime, we helped Fayette County create a land bank because the Development Authority has a lot of things that we can be focusing on without having to manage brownfields grants. But we're trying to help, again, increase the capacity of our partner network to point out the roles that someone needs to be playing if we're going to maximize the usefulness of funding, financial tools, and all the things, again, that are identified and that are really pieced together in this downtown and development strategy. With that, Jina, I think that hits on a lot of the points that I hope to in this phase of the conversation. Is that a good time to hand over?
Yeah, so thanks, Andy. As you guys can tell, there's a lot of resources available for developers for these projects, for the team that we talked about putting together, for all of the folks sitting at your table. It's how do you know how to access those? So that's really the role that NRGRDA wants to play and should play and does play, which is we provide that technical assistance, we bring the funding partners and development partners together, and sometimes we step into and fill the gap where the gap it needs to be filled until we can find a solution. And that was a very good example of some of the brownfields projects. We didn't want to own 3 trash dumps, but here we are. So how can we move forward with finding the entity that should own those former landfill sites in the future? So with that, we want to move forward before we get to an activity that we have for you all, because we want to hear from you about how do we, really take these some ideas and put them into action. What does this look like leaving today? I want to just give us a few minutes to open up for any questions that the room might have related to development, related to challenges, or related to any questions that you have for Andy or myself. Sure.
The new market tax credit, I was very intrigued to hear that. Does our downtown area fall in that category?
It does. So our downtown, the majority of, so Beckley's downtown, Main and Neville fall in the new market tax credit zone. It does fall just outside of the downtown area, almost to where I'm going to use a landmark, the former Tudors area was, and the CVS there, it kind of stops there. So one good point with the new market tax credits, the West Virginia Development Office reapplies for a new market zone every 5 years. They have to update the recommended zone every year. And while it is a federal designation, the state development office is responsible for making the recommendation to have that federal designation. And so we are working somewhat selfishly because for those that aren't familiar, we purchased a building for our textile initiative, and we are working to try to get the new market tax credit zone moved down City Avenue so that we will now have a larger area there, because there are some demographic qualifiers for a new market tax credit. So we're working with the development office currently to help them make the recommendation to widen that new market tax credit zone. But the majority of downtown, all of Neville and Main, are in that NMTC. Additionally, and Andy can attest to this, but our Courthouse Square district is also a historic tax credit district. So those tax credits can be layered on top of one another for recruitment opportunities for investment. Other questions? Oh, back there, Allison.
Thank you very much for your time, first off.
Sure.
It's been super informative. I really appreciate you guys getting everybody on the same page.
Sure.
When we're looking at areas like Oak Hill, for example, where, there's different areas where when we're looking at redeveloping what's existing already, it seems like the easy aim would be find a way to get that the federal historical designation, so then we can work on the QRE tax credits. What happens if we don't qualify for that, but we're determined to try to redevelop an area? Where would you suggest we go next?
Yeah, so defining an area for a historic district is not easy. Defining a building for a historic district is not easy. We're going through that with a couple buildings that we're doing right now. But there are a lot of tools that you can use at the municipal level to create some incentives for developers. There are also opportunities for long-term leases for buildings that the communities own. That would allow folks to invest in those buildings for a return on infrastructure investment. The big challenge that we see in downtowns is just the lack of infrastructure that is there, and that is a investment that a developer really doesn't want to take the risk on. I know I probably have developers in the room that would agree they're not really interested in taking the risk on the infrastructure. So if a community is trying to prioritize where to make an investment, it should be in the infrastructure that supports that downtown redevelopment. Another easy area, a program that Michelle and I have talked about quite a bit, is a facade improvement grant. That's a really easy tool that a community can utilize and create an ordinance on their own for facade improvements, create a grant fund out of tax revenue that they have available to help buildings just sort of improve their facade. That's also an investment attractor. So those are just some easy tools that are available. But I think that if you had to determine where you were going to invest and how you were going to recruit developers, you need to look at the infrastructure first while working on those long-term tax credit scenarios. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, Brian.
Have you had any success helping to improve infrastructure along a rail and trail?
Yeah, so this is your guy. So Andy is our rail trail guy. He works really closely with the rail trail program, the Rails to Trails program in the state. He knows a lot of the coordinators of that program, and he also we also have worked closely with CSX on a lot of other rail trail projects. One of the challenges with rail trail projects is the infrastructure that has to be expanded. Let me back up. The rail owner, the CSX, whether it's CSX or Norfolk Southern or any of those, their program will never allow turnover or change in ownership long term. They're willing to improve their rail beds, but there always has to be a potential opportunity for them to put rail back. And we have run into that issue, and Andy, if you want to speak on that any further, but we have had success with temporary infrastructure through rail beds. We have not had any success with water lines, sewer lines, traditional long-term infrastructure in rail beds. That's just not the MO of the rail company itself. Do you have something to add?
Yeah.
You want this one?
Thanks. What Jen is speaking about is rail banking, and it's definitely a term that in the Rails to Trails specific project realm, that's the case. The railroad company will not necessarily want to let this thing go. If they sell the property, they're not going to get it back, and if it gets turned into something other than a railroad, then it won't be a railroad again. So a creative law at the federal level with the Surface Transportation Board has allowed railroaders to bank the property, let the community use it as a trail, and if that rail can be used again, if someone comes knocking at the railroad company's door and says, hey, we want to haul timber over that corridor again, or we want to mine some coal and use that for this same purpose, or we want to haul something across there that you've never heard before. They have the ability to do that. They then have to essentially purchase the property back from the community, but they have that right. How often does that happen? Not very often, but it is a possibility. With that in mind, I think in line with what Jen is saying, they're going to have some thoughts about what gets installed underneath it versus putting some asphalt or gravel on top of it, which could easily be removed if it needed to be put back into railroading use. We have some projects in particular, I think, in Raleigh and Fayette counties where the corridor itself of an abandoned railroad track would be a very suitable place to run a new sewer line. It's already relatively clear. When the tracks were, there's less to deal with. It's already elevated. But until that property gets out of ownership of the railroad company, I haven't seen any success in repurposing it for a different infrastructure line. But I'm not sure that's what you're asking. One thing that's definitely worth pointing out is the difference between many of the rail trails in West Virginia, which are quite rural. They go from one scenic place to another scenic place, and they don't pass by much in the meantime other than beautiful nature. And urban rail trails. Here in Beckley, Beckley has a really unusual asset in the McManus Rail Trail. It runs through downtown. That is quite unusual in West Virginia's rail trails. You see plenty of examples in larger cities. So that is to say that the rail trail here in Beckley is distinct among all the rail trails in West Virginia that I'm familiar with. And so I'm not sure if there's particular infrastructure you're speaking about, but one of the interesting things about trail projects in general, with rail trails especially, is they cross property lines. They go from one place to another by nature. And so they can't not be complicated. I had another thought on that, but
and I don't know. We don't know the intricacies. We're happy to learn more about this, and I don't know how sort of far you've had conversations. But I think at minimum, I mean, we're happy to connect you with the Rail to Trail Board of Directors, whom we work very closely with, that does have a CSX representative that could maybe come up with an alternative solution to help support. I think at minimum that's something that we can definitely make happen, right away, just to see if there's an option there.
Brian, I know the thought that escaped me there for a second. Another unusual circumstance in West Virginia is that back during the Great Depression, the state took management of county roads over. And so as soon as you get off of a city road, you're on a state road. All of our downtowns have state roads running down the middle of them. And so there's a necessary complexity to dealing with anything road related. You can't just deal with the city. You've got to be working hand in hand with the state as well. That's their property. So anything adjacent to within the transportation corridor of any roads managed by the state, you're going to have to get their approval for anything related to that too. So again, layers and layers of complexity.
And one other sort of just component to that complexity, we did work with the the Raleigh-Fayette Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, to do a Safe Streets for All study, which makes us eligible at the federal level to apply for Safe Streets implementation. Part of Safe Streets is sidewalks and lighting. So if we can utilize our Safe Streets action plan to help support, the city of Beckley or the state in a sidewalk implementation or lighting, we can absolutely explore it. But I think there are some conversations we can maybe help elevate to see if we can get some more concrete answers just to support. So we're happy to continue that conversation if you'd like.
And another excellent resource that hasn't been mentioned specifically, the Rails to Trails Conservancy, a national organization, has their resource library available online. So speaking of case studies, if a rail trail has dealt with an issue, there's going to be information about it, points of contact, and the folks at the Conservancy are always willing to help, especially the ones particularly focused on the state of West Virginia, which Jina mentioned earlier.
David has a question, I think.
I've got a question following up about the rail banking. I remember reading some years ago, Greenbrier River Trail was rail bank. I guess we checked this event that, and I think it's when I first came across the chart. But in the case of the McManus Trail, wasn't that an outright sale by CSX to the city, and then CSX no longer had any whatsoever to do with it? In other words, is the McManus Trail rail bank or not?
I'm not sure. Here we have the city manager.
Do you have the covenant in it that says there's no utilities underground on that trail? I've been in contact with CSX, they said that they would contact us. And that they would approve anything that the city wanted to ask. Or we could ask for their approval. They have to approve anything we put on the rails. And yes, we purchased it for $100,000, but they valued the property at $2.8 million.
So that's why they still have it today.
Yes. Well, no, there was a covenant that they had to sign. That covenant says that there would be no underground.
Regional property owners can remove covenants, yeah.
David, what I think underlying that, and what we certainly find in the rail banking with rail trails in particular, is that covering up the corridor is an effective means of separating people from any contamination that may be in the soil. Digging into it is a different story, and that's where installing anything under the surface, I think, is fundamentally where the issue lies.
And I think it is still worth a conversation. Original property owners remove covenants from deeds. It does have to lie at the original property owner level. So I do think, there is some conversation that could be had, and advocacy that Rails to Trails could consider with CSX related to this. We can connect the resources as best we can to see if we can come up with a solution. And the success that we found with a lot of difficult problems is if we present a solution, traditionally they're willing to listen rather than just asking the question and getting the direct answer. So happy to explore that one further, for sure. Any other questions? You guys are quiet. I'm now going to make you talk. So we're going to wrap up today's session with a quick activity, and I really hope you guys will be participatory in this, because the goal is for us to walk away with some next steps and action items on what you all what are some common themes that we're seeing in our communities? What are some resources that we're having trouble finding? What what to-do list do we need to come up with in order to effectively advocate for changes with downtown redevelopment, help streamline processes, and help make recommendations that could further redevelopment in rural communities. So what I am going to ask you guys to do today, you have some ink pens in front of you and some paper. I'm going to ask you to take a couple minutes and write 1 to 2 realistic next steps that we can take locally to support downtown development and downtown revitalization. So when we're thinking about this, think about, no answer is the wrong answer. Is that convening groups of people? Are we thinking about streamlining permitting? Do we want to have a focus group with our downtowns? What are 1 to 2 realistic next steps that we could take locally to support downtown revitalization?
And if you guys can keep that microphone like it is, it's ideal.
I talk with my hands,
Because I know, because we're right in front of us, we don't have any room.
Okay.
Yeah, that was why too. Thank you.
So while you guys are doing this, I'm going to give you some prompts. Do we have one opportunity for improvement in our downtown? What does that look like to you all? One action that you could personally take or empower someone else to take to help support your downtown and your community with development. Or one person, organization, or resource that you think should be at the table helping with this that we have not mentioned or that is not present in this room. So again, 1 to 2 realistic next steps we could take. Think about it in terms of one opportunity for improvement, someone else that needs to be at the table, or an action that you can personally take. Oh, wait, sorry. I got it. I would make Josie do it. We're gonna get some mood music going here. All right. That's your thinking music. Oh, of course. All right, I think we have ideas. All right, you got all the answers. Come on. Okay. Yeah.
Getting confident.
All right, let's wrap it up. All right, are we ready? I'm going to call on you, so you have to be ready. And Andy's going to bring a mic around. Dwayne says we have to use these mics, so we're going to use the mics. All right, how about let's get someone from that side of the room. How about Josie's table over there? You guys, tell me what you guys wrote down. What are 1 to 2 realistic next steps that we could take locally to support downtown revitalization?
Who's our spokesperson?
We just mentioned maybe looking at the land bank opportunity because we do not think that the city is working on it, but based off of what we heard today, we think that might be a great opportunity to look at.
Yeah, we love land banks. We're all about it. So we have committed to the city as well as Raleigh County that if they want separate land banks, we're here for it. If they want to work together for a countywide land bank, we're here for it. And those are a vital tool. So very excited to have community folks that also want to support that land bank. Let's see. Let's get somebody from this table, Christy's table.
So as a small business owner and having been around others who are developers, knowing where to go to get information and having that all in one space, it seems like well, you go over there to get this, and then you go over there, and that person doesn't really know where to tell you to make the next step. So if we had a how-to and where do you go for help and what office has what permit and what information, I think that would be great.
That's awesome. So let me see a show of hands. Christy's recommendation is something that we've thought about, we've talked about frequently, that NRGRDA is willing to convene. We don't have all the answers, but we're willing to be the convener of what we call a municipal action committee or a downtown redevelopment committee. Who would participate in that if, as an active participation, if we were to launch something like that? So we have folks that want to participate in something like that. We want, obviously we would work hand in hand with the chamber and other organizations, but it can only be as effective as those that participate in that project team that we talked about, those folks that we need at the table to move it forward. So that's something we'll follow up with after this, but I think that's a great idea. I mean, we often find ourselves having to direct and we're industrial developers. We are focused on community assets, but as a traditional EDA, we don't normally dive into those things, but we see the need and we're happy to convene if that is the overall goal, but it has to be a collective effort. So I really like that idea. All right, I'm gonna get two more before we wrap up. How about Zach Statler's table? Zach is a new board member of NRGRDA, so he gets called on today. So what about this table? What can we do for downtown as a business owner or a business operator in downtown? What can we do better? What's an idea that we should focus on in our downtown?
One thing that I've thought about since I've been working downtown the last 3 years is the lack of living for downtown, not just for the businesses that are there, but we're Main Street's a couple blocks from Tech, and I think we definitely lack the living, quality living, I guess.
So that's what we call quality of place, livability, walkability, and I'm really shocked nobody's talking about transportation. How do we get from one place to the other? That's a big challenge, connectivity. So all of these are valuable vantage points that valuable points that we can talk about. Livability, walkability are huge. Downtown Beckley specifically they passed a safe streets ordinance. What year, Andy?
17, 18.
That's when they had a bike and pedestrian action committee. That committee is no longer operating. That committee allows access to federal programs. Having that ordinance in the city of Beckley allows access to federal programs for bikeability and walkability in communities. It's not being utilized. So how do we revive things like that to make it more walkable, more livable, and the quality of place, a better quality of place? So I'm gonna take one more. I'm gonna go with two more because he's got one that's burning. But I'm going to go with Mr. Houston back there. Mr. Houston, what do you feel is a valuable or a potential opportunity for a downtown community? As someone who has lived in other places and is now in West Virginia, what do you feel are 1 to 2 things that we could do to improve our downtown?
Well, I had one on my list, and it's the dilapidated houses. There is certainly a housing shortage here, but there are a lot of houses. And these houses could be rehabilitated, and you provide a place for somebody to live. If you do a really good job, they can be owner-occupied, which we've had pretty good success with. And you get these houses back on the tax rolls. So you bring people back into communities, you improve the streets, you improve the crime situation sometimes. And it's profitable business. So, I think that would be the one area that I deal with.
And wouldn't it be great if developers could work directly with land banks to take ownership of these properties, help get them cleaned up, and then purchase them and flip them for redevelopment?
Oh yeah, that would be great. There are hundreds and hundreds of these houses in Raleigh County, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. And we've got one more from David up front. Oh, yep.
Too many joking hazards for me to run.
All right. Just a couple of points. First, as a proud WVU grad, as I'm sure many in this room are, we remember how the Morgantown campus butts right up against High Street. So it was easy for the students to be patrons of the downtown businesses. we're not too far from that in the sense of a pleasant flat walk between the WVU Tech campus and the downtown. So my recommendation is, if there's anyone from the Raleigh County Chamber of Commerce here, maybe within earshot, perhaps develop a downtown business guide to be given to new WVU Tech students each fall, welcoming them to campus and listing the businesses which are ready to, serve them in a short walk away in a pleasant area. And perhaps in some of those open areas there, maybe WVU Tech consider building dormitory space, like in that nice big hole on Neville Street, for example, or something like that. And then also along the lines of housing, in the sense of those upstairs of our buildings, which may have once been offices or the like, they would probably be perfect for redevelopment as loft housing. So those are the 2 points there, thinking about the housing and outreach to the college campus.
Thank you.
All right, so anybody else that has a burning recommendation for downtown redevelopment, what we can do as a community to work together, or do you feel like these themes capture it really well and we feel like there's energy behind this and we want to get folks involved in this and folks want to commit to this, but we also want to see a deliverable come out of a group of people that want to focus on this? Parking's huge.
Can't even go uptown to eat at a nice restaurant or go to pay your taxes without getting a place to park, So, I mean, I walk from Southern Communications, that's where I work. I'll walk uptown because I can't get a place to park, So it's just, how can we get restaurants to come uptown or businesses to come uptown when we can't find places? I used to go to coffee shops that were uptown, and I would get a ticket before I could walk in and out of the coffee shops that used to be uptown before I could get back to my car early morning. So yeah, I have bad thoughts about parking uptown.
Yeah, I think parking is a huge issue in a lot of communities. It is a major issue in downtown Beckley. It's an issue in other communities that we have as well. There are some case studies and innovative solutions that we can pursue. I know that City Council in Beckley is trying to prioritize figuring out the parking scenario, but again, they can't do it on their own, right? They have to have community support. Christy?
I know that we have paid in the past, and I think multiple times, for a city plan, for a strategic plan for the city. What are we doing with that plan? Have we implemented any parts of it? Is NRGRDA willing to collaborate and get their hands on the plan? I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah, so I can speak for our region. So for NRGRDA, we have 2 guidebooks that we use as development guidebooks. One is a comprehensive plan that communities and counties have. Communities and counties can have comprehensive plans regardless of if they have zoning or not. So that is a common misconception that you can only have a comp plan. You only have to have a comp plan if you have zoning. That's not true. We're actually talking to the Nicholas County Commission about doing one now. That really serves as a development guidebook, and it also provides a lot of public input opportunity. I know we just went through the comprehensive planning process in Beckley. The next question is how do you move that forward into actionable steps? And so that's a conversation that we're willing to convene to say how do we want to chunk this up, because expecting the municipality or the county alone to execute their plan is just that's not feasible. And so I do think that downtown redevelopment should be a key part of that. There's also a plan that we had that was completed in Beckley. Miller and Associates did it. Monica did it years ago before we were with NRGRDA. It's a great plan. It's a phenomenal plan. It just hasn't been executed. And so how do we, we're not starting from scratch if we bring these folks to the table. I think we need to come up with an implementation plan for, the resources that we have available. Sure.
When Mayor Reckles was in office, and I remember reading this in the paper, when if anybody else can. Anyway, the paper had an excellent story about a study was done by a consultant for the city of Beckley. I remember the consultant listed things like microbrewery, and this is downtown.
Yeah, this is Monica Miller's assessment. Yeah, it's,
Table restaurant, WB,
yes.
Geared place, all kinds of wonderful ideas. Now, that must be in writing. Have you got a copy of that where you can go through and say, okay, let's try this, because that was done last first. Do you have a copy of that?
Yes, that's the plan we were just referencing. Miller and Associates did that plan. But again, it's not just NRGRDA's role to implement, right? That we can be a convener, but it's going to take community members, developers, investors, county officials, all of those folks to move forward with an implementation strategy.
But you have a copy.
Yes, absolutely.
The other elephant in the room is a perception of safety and security in downtown Beckley. And we have to, and you talk about partnership, we have to have a partner in the city and the police department to put together a plan of what we can do to do something about that. Because until we fix that, it's hard to get people to want to go downtown past, daylight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's hard to allow businesses, it's hard to encourage them to stay open later hours. We talk about a lot of the businesses in downtown, well, why aren't you open for dinner? Or why can't we grab a beer after work? Well, we're not sure our employees are safe downtown. We don't know what kind of street traffic we're going to get. We ran into this in our office at, on Main Street. We've had to put in a security system, and it is what it is. These are not challenges that other communities haven't faced. We just need to figure out a solution working with leadership to move forward. And I do believe that in both the comprehensive plan and Monica Miller's assessment, there was a safety component of that has not been implemented. So,
One more.
Over here.
Lighting areas at night with street lights that are currently dark. It's really not hard to do.
Yeah.
So that would be a big point right there, because bad people shun the light.
Yeah, absolutely.
They like to be seen, so the brighter the light, within reason.
We've got one more back here. Did we
Good
have one more?
evening. I'm Philip Gerald, new city manager. Okay? As far as parking goes, we're passing an ordinance tonight, the second reading, and you will get 2-hour free parking from 8 o'clock to 4:30 in the evening for most of the streets downtown. I'm willing to work with anybody if you want to meet, Richard, and we can work out some of these problems. I believe I met Ms. Belcher yesterday on a live session. So the council is working on a land bank. The city attorney has it, Mr. Fowle, and he's working on that at the current time. I just want to let you know that we are working on those things, and we'll certainly keep you informed of them. Okay?
Do you have any other questions or common themes that we want to make sure to capture before we move forward with wrapping up? And I think next is our legislative reception. Any other questions before we wrap? All right, so in terms of next steps, I encourage everyone to check out downtownplaybook.org. It's a great development playbook to move forward with. You also, on your tables, have a readiness assessment. That is a phenomenal tool to apply to your communities or your project to determine how ready is it for development. When do you bring in a developer partner? When do you assemble your team? So that is a really great tool for those of you that want to utilize that. And again, visiting the Downtown Playbook is a great resource that can help you assess readiness, identify funding pathways, and connect with strategies and see more case studies that we've talked about. So NRGRDA is always here to help however we can. We don't have all the answers, but we're certain that we can at least, at minimum, connect you to someone that can help support. I do agree that a more formalized way to direct folks where to go for help is very much needed, and if we're all singing from the same songbook, it really helps the community get traction for development and moving forward. So we want to keep the momentum moving forward on this. I will work with Michelle to send out a poll of those that would be interested, of attendees that would be interested in moving forward with some downtown redevelopment work through some of the Downtown Pulse things that the chamber is doing. And as always, Andy and I are here to help, as well as any of our other staff. So we appreciate you all listening, taking the time to engage, and letting us talk through some of the challenges and potential solutions that we see. Thank you, guys.